So I want to just share, because I've been really excited, Jazz, by the last week. We've had people sending in tweets to us around what happens for them in response to last week. So this is kind of what we've pulled together in terms of what some people have said. And some of you will know, if you've already been on Twitter and found us at school, CIC, all right, you will have found that some of these tweets have already gone out. All right, we've already posted some of these. Top left then, Jazz, this one's especially for you. It's about amazing energy and positivity, and you make us feel like we can all really make a difference. And Jazz, I want to feel more of that today, so I'm really looking forward to that one. I have to admit, I went away and reflected after last week and really realised, I don't think I'd realised I made so many nautical connections, but I do. And so I really love the one that says, I love the boat analogy, that everybody's boat changes often, and you find yourself, if you find yourself in a luxury yacht, then help those who are in a leakier vessel. And I really love that idea. It was a really well summarised tweet. Thank you very much for that one. And then we've also got the one in the bottom right, sorry, which is all about summarising last week's session. I think it pretty much says in limited characters what last week's session was about, our scars, about us being braver, but also about us reaching out to help other boats when they need it. So the one I'm going to end on is the wonderful world of our virtual school heroes have come together again. So we're all here together now, and we're about to kind of embark on that journey around what is resilience and what can we do to navigate that as we now move forward together. So Jazz, I'm going to hand over to you. I'm going to see if I can press another magic button that says move forward. Ha ha.
So good. Thank you, Anna. And those tweets in particular, you know what's great about them? Not only does it consolidate, and I agree with you. I mean, I'm spending an hour trying to put something that someone's encapsulated in a tweet perfectly. But also it encourages those who you influence. You know, we talked about this at the beginning, but the fact that being a leader isn't your title, it's about people believing that you're worth following. And that could be students, that could be colleagues, that could be people above you actually. So sharing your tweets like that and saying this is what I noticed just can spark something in someone else, that could spark a conversation. In advertising, I think it used to be 7, then it was 15. Last I heard from the Marketing Society, 35 times we have to see something, a message 35 times before it registers with us and can give us the opportunity to change. Now, I've spent the last 25 years changing people's minds about themselves as a profession. That's basically what I do. I'm not fixing broken people. I'm not, being a savior to like wounded children, but I am helping and encouraging people to change their mind about themselves. Change is my big thing. I'm like, often when we talk about transformation, and I love that word. But when people talk about transformation, I think of like caterpillar to butterfly, like going to bed as a creepy, crawly, like hairy thing with legs, and then waking up with wings. That's transformation. But I think when we talk about transformation in education, sometimes as a system, we're talking about creating a quicker, cheaper caterpillar rather than an actual butterfly. But what we do in the human sense with the children and the students, the young people we spend time with, is true transformation. So these tweets are kind of encapsulated messages of the impact that's had on you, and then the impact that you will have on others. And I want to encourage you to be a conduit of everything that you take on that's positive. Don't keep it to yourself. We used to sing when I used one of the first songs I learned when I taught my class when I had a year 1 class was love is like a magic penny, hold it tight, you won't have any, lend it, spend it, you'll have so many, they'll roll all over the floor. And I always loved the idea of not being a bottleneck in anything. So that's why this is the first slide. This is something I said at the end of my TEDx talk in Norwich. And what was interesting about it is that this is what kept me unresilient. This is what kept me back. This is what made me keep playing small. And inadvertently is what I passed on to those I led and influenced. The smallness of it was because my desire for things to be better was not bigger than my fear of trying. It wasn't bigger. Now, right now, I can sit here and say, I want change more than I want to be right. I want change more than I want justification. I want change more than I want acknowledgement. I want change more than I want the world to own it. I want change more. So suddenly my kind of leaning into that is so powerful that it enables me to do things that I wouldn't usually do. Now, people read this as resilience and confidence, but actually the secret to it is that I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with things going wrong because I know how to reframe. And that's because of you. That's purely down to you. When I look at the journey and going on The Apprentice, going on Blind Date and saying yes to stuff and doing the things, that isn't who I was, but it's who I became because of you. So what I'm talking about today isn't just something to navigate this time now. It's not even just something to navigate this time now with the young people we're with. It's something to make your legacy. It's part of who you are becoming and part of what you will leave behind. I used to coach in a school where they had a toilet, and in the toilet it said, please leave this bathroom as you would expect to find it. And I thought, I think we could do better than that. So I graffitied it, please leave this bathroom better than you would expect to find it. And I put my deodorant on the shelf. So then I was in and out of this school. I was coaching the leadership team, so I come in like every month or so. The next time I went, I thought, I'm going to go and check that bathroom. And there was a little pot of flowers there. I'm like, someone had taken the sign and laminated it. The next time I went back, there was like some tissues and that. The next time I went back, there was a box of Tampax. Now we're cooking on gas. The last time I was there, they'd repainted the wall. That bathroom's now the nurture room. I mean, it's just that kind of, how do we, leaving things as we expect to find them is such a small game. This is not what we do. What we do is we level up, incrementally improve, measurable impact over time. And in order to do that, resilience is going to have to be a central tenet and core, because there's never going to be a time where this is easy. There's never going to be. We think this is tricky now. Imagine sliding doors. Imagine COVID hadn't happened. So would you be sat there now, sort of lazily waiting for the deckhand to bring you a cocktail, or thinking about the play you're going to see tonight? No, you'd be in the same state that you're in. You'd be the same, under the same pressure. It might be less, it might be more, but it's nothing. Like, the world is happening to us, whether we acknowledge it or not. So circumstances, an external locus of control, that is one thing that we can say, I can't take responsibility for those things because they're not coming from me. But I think resilience means being very intentional about what you do take responsibility for and the way you show up. Because the number one thing that the students are going to take, the young people are going to take from this experience, is not what the R number was. It's not how rubbish Britain was at containing the virus. It's not even Boris Johnson's many, many U-turns. What they're going to remember is how the adults in their life showed up. You are writing their coronavirus story. The story they will be telling when they're your age, you're writing it now. So what sort of story do you want them to tell? And how do we embed it into them by living it, being it, like, finding our voice and living our story so that has the most impact on others. Does that sound good as a kind of kickoff? That's kind of where we're going? Jump onto the next slide, Anna. At the beginning of 2020, I took a word of the year. Now, if I said to you, get ready to type in the chat box. If I said to you right now, I want you to forget what's happened. It's the 15th of July. You've just been born. Think of one word that you want to be your word for next week. One word that you want to be your word for next week. Pop it in the chat box. What's your word? Tiff says calm. Tiff, you might have to find a little place for your young one to be if calm is to be achieved. But yes, it's good to aim for. Positivity, said Deborah. Relaxed. We've got 3 relaxers from Katie, Rachel and Sarah there. Positive, progress, improvement, resourceful, complete, hope. Hallelujah. Yes. Regroup. That's a good one. Calm, recharged. Fantastic. I'm loving these words. This is good. Keep them coming. Minimum. I like that, Tanya. Minimum. Yeah. Not in the school end of term. Finally will arrive. It will come. It's coming. 2020, I always have a word of the year. And that word of the year states my intent. So it's not an aspirational word. Like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if I could be generous, if I could be recharged? It's not aspirational. It's intent. And intentional is incredibly powerful, because what we all know because of our tendencies is that we tend to go on automatic and do stuff on automatic. We make decisions, we have knee-jerk reactions, we react, we get offended, we get hurt, we feel bad, and then ultimately it all boils down to, I'm not good enough. And we just sit on this imposter syndrome bench with everybody else with a vulnerability vulture on their shoulder. So not being good enough, what happens when you are on automatic. The secret to being resilient, the secret to reinvention, the secret to standing out in your own strength and power to make a difference is to be intentional. And intentional was my word of 2020. And what it's done is it's kind of made me focus on, where am I spending my time? How am I investing my time? What return am I getting on my time? What stories am I telling about my time? Oh, I haven't got any time. Oh, pull me. That was a big anthem last year, and that's changed. I actually forced myself to say, I have not made that a priority, so it has not been done. And it's awful, because most of the time I'm saying that about stuff that, you know, like, where have you been looking after yourself this week? I have not made that a priority, so that has not been done. You know, and that ownership has made me fall into intentional before. So when you declare these words, I really want you to think about what it would look like if they were to be real. If that was real for you, what would it look like? So some of the people who wrote the words, give me, what would you be doing if hope was how you live next week? If people turn around at the end of the week and said, do you know what, you've just embodied hope for me this week. You've been completely, when it comes to regrouping, you're the gold standard this week. What would you actually do? What would you be doing? What will you need to do to make those things happen? That's what I want you to think about, because that's when this aspirational, oh, this is what I want, becomes, this is what I'm doing. And then it becomes a way of being. Jump on to the next slide for me a moment, Anna. Thank you. This is the journey, okay, that resilience starts in. And for our young people, you know, they spend a lot of time at the first two, thoughts and feelings. There's in Myers-Briggs types, people are either T or F. You're either a thinker or a feeler, and that's in terms of how you process information. So someone who's more, actually, to be honest, we're both thinkers and feelers. It's just that your nature would lean you towards one. So you'd be stronger in one by nature, not necessarily by nurture. You might have learned to be a different way. Like you're a feeler, but you work in a very male-dominated environment, so you've become a thinker in order to kind of blend in with that. That could be. I've seen people do that before. But so if you're a thinker, then you're looking to process things and get clarity, maybe internal processing, maybe chatting with people to kind of, you know, get things straight and make decisions about stuff. You'll have a lot of internal thinking that will go on, and then you would voice that and kind of test it out. If you're a feeler by nature, feelers would make a decision on a gut instinct. Like feelers would up and move to Australia because, well, it sounds like a good idea. I mean, feelers would make big life decisions based on how they feel, because they value the information they get from how they feel so much. If it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't sit right, it's a no-go. Sometimes that's even unconscious. They're quite extrovert as feelers. They'll you know, really sort of take notice of what's happening and kind of make decisions about it. They're very good at processing data, whereas a thinker will take time to think. Now, it's not good or bad. One isn't good or bad, but thoughts and feelings, those two things are where we all start when it comes to initial ideas. And thoughts and feelings of our young people during this time have been steered into a very different place. Thoughts and feelings at school, and when school is on and when there's routine, are kind of being fed into. There's input all the time, whereas thoughts and feelings during lockdown, less input, or the input has been overwhelming, or the input hasn't met them where they are, or they feel more of an outsider than usual. So thoughts and feelings are where we need to start, because how this works is you have a thought and it makes you feel a certain way, or you have a feeling and it makes you think a certain way, depending on your order. That thought, feeling gets embedded in a belief. This is all subconscious. You don't realize this is things we've had since we were younger, since we were kids. That belief comes out in the words you say. So I'm hosting a group at the minute on imposter syndrome. And we had a thing last night where I invited everyone to speak, and every person started off by apologizing. Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't got any slides. Oh, I'm sorry, I have got slides. Oh, I'm sorry, I haven't put anything together. Oh, I'm sorry, my internet's not good. Oh, I'm sorry. This was an actual quote. I'm sorry, I tried to fake tan my legs and it hasn't gone too well. I can't even see your legs, and who cares? This idea of apologizing just for taking up space and breathing, no one needs to apologize for that. Even murderers don't apologize just for standing there. So what makes you so special? So that belief kind of gets embedded and comes out in our words and the things we say and the things we do, ultimately actions. And those actions become tendencies or become habits, and those habits become who you are. It becomes your destiny, you know, your future. So if we go back, if we want to change something, you don't change it with an action. You don't say, I'm going to stop smoking and then just put your cigarettes away. I mean, if it was that easy, there'd be a lot less smokers around. You change it by going back to the thought and feeling and kind of tweaking that, changing that, speaking into that. And that's the first step of what we want to do in school with our students. I don't know if I talked about this. I might have talked about this last week, but somebody was saying about, like when you go back, Anna, do you remember when you go back to school, you just go back to school after the summer and the teacher would say, right, what you did during the summer. And like what I did during the summer would make my teachers like toes curl. So I can't write that. She doesn't want to know what I did during the summer because nobody wants to know. So I can't write the truth. So I have to invent something that's kind of mildly palatable and might pass as a decent lie so that she can go, yeah, that's great. And what it does to me is it diminishes and undoes more and more. That's where we're in danger of. I want us to be intentional about our actions so that everything we do isn't starting from where we are, but is starting from where our young people are and what they need. And anything that we do that ties into their thoughts and feelings is going to have a big impact. So speaking into that is going to be really important. I just want to come back to Beck because she said, when I asked the question, she said, this is what it would look like, end of term, putting the laptop away, focusing back on my family and me. And I love the clarity around that because that thought will create a feeling, which will embed a belief, which will come out in the words and the actions and become a new tendency and has the potential to change who you are. And I know we sometimes go back and forth. We'll do this during holidays and then we're back on during term time. But we're being watched the whole time. And the modeling that we do around resilience, I've got this friend who's always on a diet, right? And she's got pictures of herself when she was a size 8, 40 years ago, stuck up all around her kitchen. She's got "Don't be a fat pig" written on the fridge. She's got all this stuff around. And she's got a daughter who's 8 now. And we're in her kitchen and she's opening the cupboard going, oh, I'm so fat. Oh, look how I look. Do you see? Look, you know, look at me now. Look at me now. Well, you know, it's what can you do? You have kids. And I was sitting there thinking, imagine this is being videoed and then replayed as a parenting tape later. That young girl is hearing a negative body image, seeing pictures around all the time and horrible language alongside it, and hearing you attribute your unhappiness to the fact that she was born. If you were intentional, you wouldn't want to be causing all of that, but she's not intentional. She's on automatic. So the thoughts and feelings all go all the way through. You cannot be resilient if you are on automatic. Unless you're unconsciously competent about it, and then that's useless because the whole point of us is to encourage students, is to a way of being is to encourage them into it. So that's kind of one of my questions. How can you be more intentional? How can you show up more intentionally, whether it's with the activities you ask people to do or the way that you talk to people? Because there are comments where you can talk about the things I say a lot is, how do you feel about that? So what we're going to do today is we're going to do this. How do you feel about that? What I'm thinking is that we can come together and do this. What does that make you think of? So I use the word thought and feeling as much as possible to tie in with the T and Fs that I'm dealing with. And I kind of get a feel for the ones that were more thinkers and the ones who are more feelers. And I draw that in because that is me meeting them where they are and them feeling they're in a space where they can explore. So that's a really kind of powerful one. Let's jump on to the next slide because there's 2 in particular I want to make sure that we go through for this. This is called the support challenge matrix, which is all very posh, but actually just means how we show up to others. And I'm going to tell you this for you, but my main reason for showing you this is to look at young people and find out where they are so you can meet them where they are. So the idea behind this is that as leaders, as people who are influencers, as parents, as whoever, you know, we all show up in a certain way. What we want to do is be liberating people. We want to be in the liberate quadrant. That means we give them high support and high challenge. And support comes first. Obviously, you don't challenge someone and then support them afterwards. That's a bit cruel. So high support and high challenge. Those 2 things together liberate people. You've got to calibrate your difference between your support and challenge. So the other day, I'm doing a free event for someone. And my PA sent them an email saying, hey, can you send us some details? And the guy said, no, I haven't got time for this. You know, it's all in Twitter. If she can't find it, we'll do it without her. Now, and at that point, I want to be like, excuse me, but I want change more than I want to be right. So I made him a video and sent it to him saying, hey, I know, God, it must be really busy at the moment. You must have so much to do, and that's a lot of pressure. So thank you for pulling us all together. I'm really looking forward to Thursday. I did see an email that you sent to Abby, my PA. I know that's not your best. I know that's not the best of you. I can only imagine the stress you're under, but that's not how we talk to each other. We have a real thing around being kind, and I've seen you do that, which is why I am happy to connect with you and represent you and work with you. So I just want to make sure that I call you up into kindness and compassion more than ever at this time. Anyway, looking forward to seeing you on Thursday. Now that is because I draw the line at people being rude to my people. No, that will never. Now, but I also know that he's probably under a lot of stress, and that's not his usual behaviour. But what I'm doing is trying to liberate. I'm trying to give him a way of liberating. Now, he can come back to me and ignore me. He can come back to me and go, how dare you? That's not my problem. That's all on you. That's your story. I've liberated. I've given you the opportunity for liberation. You either take it or you won't. So I try and live in that quadrant as much as possible, but it requires Jedi levels of intention and focus. It's exhausting. Sometimes what I do is I slip into dominate. Dominate is where you bring high challenge, very low support. So, and I've seen this with one of my kids, I slip into dominate, the other I slip into protect. It's very interesting. Dominate is someone who might say, come on, I'm going to do it. And we've all had a lead like this. Come on, get your head in the game, sort it. And just challenges you, but no support. And people will do. Dominating leaders actually get things done, but it's because people are scared. So it's compliance, it's not commitment. And we don't want young people to be, somebody put after last week's webinar, I fear that people will go back into the kind of leaning on the curriculum and tick box and blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, that's always going to be a temptation. It's an automatic way of being, but an intentional way of being allows us to do exactly what we're, all of that, but with a different way of showing up, which makes it more accessible for people. So dominate is where we can fall. We can fall into that, especially with kids. You have, I think, certainly with previous relationships that I've had with boyfriends, I was very much in that quadrant because it was all about fear and control for me. So I was very dominating in the way I thought and felt and showed up. Often we can slip into protect. Protect is where you high support, no challenge. Which is just like, right, we're going to do this. It's quite difficult. I'll help you with it. I mean, I'm here if you need me. Obviously, I can do it. I mean, it's probably best if I do it. I tell you what, I'll do it and then I'll show you. I'll just do it and pass it on. Right, it's all done. You don't have to worry. Don't worry, I'll do it. Protect is burnout, but protect, it breeds entitlement. It breeds mistrust and entitlement. Because people are like, good old Jaz, she'll just get it done. I mean, it encourages people to be lazy, encourages students to be lazy, encourages teams to be lazy. So there's something about protect that is incredibly damaging, even though it is you delivering massive amounts of support. The challenge is missing. So support, without that calibration of support and challenge, is never going to help. And the last one is abdicate. That's, as my friend calls it, hibernate. That's when there's no support and no challenge. And that's literally people going, well, what can you do? It's a system. I can't do anything. What can you do? What's the point of revising? I'm not going to pass any exams. What's the point? Even if I do, I'm working class. I'm never going to get a job. I'm going to live here forever. I'm never going to do. That's apathy. It leads to apathy. There's nowhere to go from that. It's a one-way street. But we do abdicate. Now, here's the interesting thing. Just have a think. As I've explained that to you, I want you to write which quadrant you think you're in at home. At home. Which quadrant are you in mostly at home? In fact, do both, home and work. Which one are you in? Home and work. Do home first, then work. So it's 2 words, home and work. Here's my thing. I have seen liberating leaders at work who have brought schools up from the bottom. Who are incredible with their children, but to themselves are completely in abdication mode. I've seen liberating leaders, CEOs whose life is in tatters because they just abdicate. They don't know anything about the kids. They don't know anything about what's going on. And the secret is we've got different circles of influence, and resilience requires you to be in alignment throughout those circles. So at home, at work, in your team, with your family, in your organization, in your wider community, that the calibration has got to be similar in order for you to really be truly living a resilient way of being. So we've got protect at work and home. Protect is so easy to fall into. It's so easy to be in because it's the easiest way. It means that you're not upsetting anyone. But the problem with that is it doesn't it's like if someone hadn't challenged me, if all I'd had was protection, I wouldn't be this strong, because the challenge has called me up rather than calling me out. It's lit a fire in me rather than lighting a fire underneath me. That's what dominate does. So, and that's what's encouraged me to kind of step into having a different belief about myself. But we protect because we start, you know, protect is, I want things to be okay. And that's good. But if, you know, and I'm hearing with, Claire says, at home liberate, at work dominate. Dominate is also quite easy. Yeah, Beck says when she's fed up, dominate. This is the automatic tendency coming out here. Dominate is interesting because it's not always that you're evil or horrible. People can be quite passive aggressive. People can be quite, you know, they can kind of use their wiles to get what they want. But the whole point is, you could be liberating at home, dominating at work. You could be protecting at home, abdicating at work. You could be doing all that. But the most important circle is to yourself. So put that word in. Where do you show up for yourself? A dominating leader of self would say things like, oh, what's wrong with you? For goodness sake, come on. How could you? You've done it wrong again. I can't believe you've done this. Whereas if a friend made a mistake, would have a totally different version. And a protect person will be like, well, let's not try. Well, we don't want to, you know, let's just keep it safe. I mean, there's no need to run on. An abdicate person will go, there's no point. There's no point. There's absolutely no point. And they can get quite strong-minded about that. There literally is no point. Or they could be very, that's all abdicate. So where are you for yourself? And the reason I want you to reflect on this and pop a word in the chat box is it's going to be the same for the young people we spend time with. These are the 4 states. These are the 4 ways we show up for other people. You can see that their attempt at domination might be, you know, acting out or challenging. I hate the term challenging behaviour because distressed behaviour is more accurate. But that might, because they haven't got the control you've got. There's a power hierarchy, and you're an adult and they're a child, so they can't discriminate against you. Well, they can, but you've got the power. So, you know, ultimately, there's not much they can do. But they will feel or be in one of these quadrants at any point of time, and it might be one at home and one at school. For me, I was very much in abdicate at home. I just, because I was under a dominating leadership, so I just abdicated completely, and that spilled into school. And school were constantly trying to liberate me, but it was very dangerous, because if I became liberated at school and then went home and was liberated, my life would have been even more difficult, because I had to disappear, put up and shut up. So I stayed in abdicate in order to stay safe, and protect was always a level up for me. I see lots of people saying dominate, protect. Well done. Yeah, protect. I mean, liberation is where we want to be. So you know, you could be a little bit north of dominate, moving into liberation, but dominate is very common. This is something that I would start with in school, and you can use different words, or you can take a picture of this. But I would be starting with this with young people, asking them, explaining what it is, doing what I've done, asking where they are to themselves. Because when you know that you are in dominate, that's where you can be intentional about living a different way of being. And the next slide, Anna, jump us on, will show us how we do that. I've done a kind of infinity curve, because you never graduate from this awareness and self-improvement kind of reflection, school of self-improvement. You never really graduate from that. So what we're trying to do all the time is embed this into students. But you can teach swimming without getting wet, but I don't know that you can embed resilience without getting wet. I don't know that it's the same. So in order to, the best thing is to look at ourselves. Even better than that is to articulate the journey of ourselves to others, to those we seek to influence. So the idea here is, starting at the bottom, we all have tendencies, right? Your tendency might be to talk over someone else. Your tendency might be to be a perfectionist, so you're never happy or satisfied with what you've done. That tendency, something triggers it, and that tendency causes you to take a particular action, which has consequences and becomes your reality. So my tendency was to doubt myself and think I wasn't good enough for anything, even though evidence and data would say otherwise. My actions for that was to not volunteer for things, to not put myself forward, to just keep my head down and play it small, because I don't want to get into a row or make an argument. The consequences are that I always felt that I could do more, but there's something stopping me. I used to feel like I had something on my chest pressing me down. And so the reality became that I'm not able to change. I'm not able to do anything because of the pressure, because of the weight. And my story became, I can't do anything, which fed into my tendency of doubting myself, which started the whole thing again. And so the thing here, like the thoughts and feeling, is to change what happens, change the triggers. So my tendency changed to, or my tendency stays the same, it's fixed. I still doubt myself. That's never going to change. That's something. But when it happens, I use that as a trigger into, right, so let's go straight to thoughts and feelings. Let's find some evidence and data in the thoughts and feelings. And that's when I can process what people have said and done with me and to me and for me, because they have become my new thoughts and feelings. The with alignment has changed the way I think and feel. To just reinforced it. With has transformed it. That's the caterpillar approach. So the action being changed, to use it as a trigger, then the action suddenly says, okay, so I may doubt myself, but evidence tells me this. So I will say yes to that because I've done this here before and it worked well. The consequences are it does go well. And then I'm like, so what I did worked. So, okay, this gives me a new way of being. And the reality is suddenly I'm not afraid to say yes anymore. Suddenly I'll put myself forward anymore. So this can you can have this as a negative infinity or a positive infinity story, but it's finding out what your tendencies are that will give you the most work on this. And when it comes to resilience, when it comes to working with young people, our tendencies are painfully obvious to them. You can't even talking the talk on this. Walking the walk is so important. Talking the talk is almost insulting if you're not doing it. That's why we've talked before about conversation, meeting people where they are, sharing that kind of, this is my journey, this is what I've done. I'm doing nothing more than encouraging you to show up as a human first. But the intentionality around it is what makes it so powerful. Let me just jump on to the next slide, and then I want to talk about capital, because capital is really important. And then I'm going to ask you a question about that. I think I talked about this before, but I just wanted to get it really clear. This is the source for this. Bill Ekstrom. Ekstrom. That word. If you Google built that TEDx, you'll come up with his talk about, he's got 4 circles, I use 3. And he talks about the idea that I talk about chaos navigators and order navigators. Chaos is over here, control's over here. In control, you're comfortable. Like, we borrow dogs off that website, Borrow My Doggy. Some of the dogs, you make them a bed, you put them down. They don't want to go for a walk. They're far too happy lying on that bed. And it's just so annoying. I've borrowed it with a specific, I want to take a dog for a walk. And the dog's like, this is the life. So comfort is not a great place because you can't grow. You can't grow. And we hanker for control. We want to be in control. We want to feel we've got more control. What do you do with it when you've got it? You've got control over what you eat and how much exercise you do and how much sleep you get. You control that. Well, unless you've got a toddler, but you can control that. What do you do with it? Are you using it? We don't use what we can control anyway. So control makes us kind of lazy. The other end of the spectrum is chaos. That's where we've all been. That's where, we've been in our luxury yacht. Some people are still navigating it in a boat with a broken oar. And that chaos over time erodes your ability to even make good decisions about stuff, because fear is driving your bus, and your highest and best is getting from suffering to surviving. Just surviving. Just looking forward, survive, which is this is suffering, hands down. Surviving is just one step up. It's here. Seeking, sort of thriving, is where you've got the ability to take your hands off your face, not have blinkers, look around and thrive a bit, be more alive. But driving change is where we want to get to. But the problem is, when you're in chaos, survival is the highest and best. So what we're in the business of is moving past thriving, beyond surviving, and actually onto driving change. How do we get our young people to incorporate driving change when they have been in chaos? And whether that chaos is, I couldn't go to Nando's, or I've been in an abusive home for the past 6 months, it's all relative. People often, when they hear me talk, say, mine's not as bad as yours. It's not a freaking competition. Who's got the best X Factor backstory? If your trauma was you weren't allowed on a motorbike, that's that. I've seen people with like nothing like what I've gone through on the floor, because for them it was the biggest. So it's not a competition about how bad things have been. It's my chaos and your chaos could be different, but it's still chaos. So if we really want to lean into meeting those young people where they are and ourselves, it's stepping into complexity. In coaching to complexity, you can fall into complexity, but complexity is that beautiful fertile ground in between them, which is where you've got to be comfortable at being uncomfortable. You get comfortable with discomfort so that you can stay there and ask better questions. And nobody wants to be in complexity because they're worried about getting it wrong. Around all the George Floyd stuff, nobody wants to talk about diversity and wellbeing because they might offend someone. And yet we're all scared of talking about it, so nothing will change, because nothing will change until our desire for things to be different is bigger and stronger than our fear of trying. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to say, I'm not ready, but we have to own it. If you say, well, I can't because of this circumstance or this, or because my role, or because my students, or because, own it. I'm not brave enough. I'm not ready yet. Because when you are, and you will be, it will be an easier transition. It will be an easier embedding of ambitious resilience. If you tell yourself you can't because of this, this, and this, it makes it even harder to actually take that step forward. So when we're thinking about this in terms of young people, the language around, it's not even what we say, it's the way we say it. I think that's the great prophet Bananarama. It ain't what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's going to be really important in embedding and encouraging people to do it. And Alex, you're absolutely right. The learning pit. We talk about the learning pit as if it's a tool for getting an extra 2 marks in geography. The learning pit is the secret of life. It's just, so rather than it being an optional extra that we put up as a display, isn't it nice? We live it. I mean, we need to be linking those things up for people. James Nottingham, just Google James Nottingham or the learning pit. There's loads of different diagrams, there's loads of different displays, there's loads of different ways of embedding it, but be intentional about it. Don't be automatic, let's get a display, let's put it up, let's move some photos up. Be intentional. My kids have got learning pits in their bedrooms. And one of them has got, she's 16 now, we just have a V, and it's the V is the pit, here's the beginning, there's the bottom, and she just puts a mark where she is. And sometimes she'll just put a mark there and show me. And I'll be like, talk to me about how that feels. Because I know she's a feeler. Thinking about it is not easy for her, but feeling. Oh God, so how it feels, because that's her language. If my son does it, it's like, well, how does that make you, what do you think about when you think about that? That's how he articulates it. So this learning pit analogy all the time. Forget learning, being. Learning is doing. Doing is not useful until being is in place. We need to apply the learning pit to being. That's what complexity does for you. So on that note, jump on to the next slide. And Anna, you're going to have to be, you can listen. And when I say the next word, jump on. Because in my PowerPoint, this is automatic, but I've got manual Anna on it. So you'll get it. It's easy. Here's the idea. There's 5 types of capital, 5 things at your disposal that you can invest in. During this time in COVID is especially relevant because people suddenly think, I've got to reframe, what am I going to do? And so these types of capital is where you can invest your time and your energy in growing. And each type of capital is 10 times more powerful than the one before. So if you invest in the first one, the same amount of time and energy as you invest in the second one's going to take it through the roof. So we start off with financial because that's what people think about when they think of capital. It's financial. You know, have I got enough money? Have I invested my money? Have I saved up? Have I paid my debts off? I'll be okay once I've done this, or if I can earn this, or if I... money. And I understand that. I've come from a place where I didn't have clothes to wear or food to eat. You know, I had no coat. So going outside was a nightmare. Trying to get to school in the winter was a nightmare. I get it. And money doesn't make a difference. It's something that people who have money say or people who have money now say. It's a gift of something you can only realize when you're not on the other side of it. Because when you don't have financial capital, you're in suffer the whole time. So it's all right, people in survival going, it's fine once you lift your head up. Yeah, it is if you've got food to buy, you know, money to buy food. So I get it. But when we think about, are we financially secure? Are we safe in our finances? Are we going to be okay? And I don't know if it's the same for some of you, because if you're an educator, you know, you've still been paid. My business stopped. I lost everything the moment COVID hit because there's no events. So I can't go and speak. But because I'm a resilience ninja, I'm like, right, reframe. What do people need? Let's serve it. I can live for a month without worrying. So let's give. Now we're at this point. This is where they're feeling. This is where they are. So I'll create a course. I have more than survived. I've gone past thriving and being alive because I know how to reframe and pivot because I've done it so many times. Not because I read a book on it or somebody told me about it. I've experienced challenge and failure so many times that it is second nature for me to reframe. Financial capital is the lowest form of capital you can invest in. It kind of feels like it's safe. It's the lowest form of investment. The one that's 10 times incrementally more powerful than that, go Anna, is intellectual intelligence. intellectual capital. When you invest in like what you've done with this, coming on this call, thinking about things differently, being open to people who are different to you and the way they think, so that you can better serve and better meet people where they are, so that you can be a better example, but so that you can help young people navigate the chaos that their boat is in. Intellectual capital is about learning. It's about asking questions. It's about going on. If you have intellectual capital, you will be infinitely more valuable to your organization, to your school, to your family, to the young person you're serving. Because if you've got intellectual capital, you can always get financial capital. But if you might have financial capital but no intellectual capital, and you can't grow. The next one, though, even more important, physical capital. You trying to do any of this if you're ill. If you've got a terminal illness, the battle is so steep and uphill. It's still possible, but physical capital, the idea of being mentally and physically safe and well, that enables you to have, I mean, I would pick that over intellectual and financial anytime, because I could have all the intellectual property in the world, but I've been in hospital with pneumonia, unable to move with a mask on, and it didn't matter what I knew. It didn't matter how much money I had in that point. I could not do anything. I mean, I wasn't even me, because I couldn't gesture or articulate. With no physical capital, with no mental or emotional strength, with no physical well-being, you're subtracting rather than adding to any situation you're in. This is really important, because the physical well-being, if you think about it, of young people at home, I'm looking at my kids, and I actually, parent now and again, but my kids' eating habits, the reliance on sugar, because at any moment, I'm bored, the cupboard's there. They've eaten so much more sugar than they ever would do in a school day. And I've bought it as well, because I'm like, oh gosh, how can I keep them quiet? So there's a bag of Haribos in our cupboard at the minute. We never have Haribos. Haribos are for journeys somewhere. But we've kind of, on automatic, bought stuff that will give the kids a treat, so that it might give us an extra 5 minutes to do that last email. And my kids in turn have generated an automatic habit of eating more sugar. So when they go back to school and they're back in this routine where they can't just shove Haribos in the mouth every 10 minutes, even just managing their kind of hunger and blood sugar throughout the day is going to be different. So even on a physiological level, things are going to be different. So meeting that need has got to be really important, because when you know how hard it is to be inspired when you're tired. I mean, it's if you haven't eaten the right kind of food, trying to be, let's learn the bus stop method for long division, or let's just lay here until I pass out because I've got no energy. One of the things I remember the most is Mondays, because I wouldn't have eaten a meal since Friday. Hot school dinner on Friday was the last time I ate. So Monday morning was hell. I always got detention first thing Monday morning. And people say, it's because you've been wild all weekend. It's like, no, I haven't eaten anything. And I am on my last nerve. I am just trying to see it through to 12 o'clock. So yeah, if things are going to kick off, because I'm like literally running on empty. So a lot of our students, a lot of our young people have been running on empty in some way, but physical, emotional, mental well-being capital is going to be quite an important way to invest. The next one is relational capital. This one is one of it's. I value this more than anything else. If you have invested in relationships, then you can encourage change around physical. You can encourage change and invite change around intellectual. You can set people up to be able to have those things in place to make a financial, to enter into things financially. But without relationship, this is the influence of the future. This is 2020 and beyond. It's going to be, it has been in education, and it will be even more about relationship. So the relationships that we can build, the investment that we can put in relationship where we are vulnerable as well as, authentic, those relationships are going to be the ones that are going to make a big difference as people go forward. Relational capital is huge, because it's in a way, it's like it's who you know, but it's not who you know. It's what you've done for who you know. It's how who you know trusts you. It's how you've people rely on you. That's what will make a big difference. And the biggest way, I don't know if you can guess, but the biggest capital that you can invest in is actually spiritual. Now, when I say spiritual, this could be, if you've got a faith, this is absolutely your faith, that belief that there's something bigger than you, that, is infinitely powerful and loving. And that's, if you belong to a community, a faith community, absolutely. If you're really into sport, spiritual. You look at football supporters, oh my gosh, it's a religion, it's a faith. If you have a community or something you belong to, that you fight for a cause that's higher than all of you, that you are part of an organization or something, or sometimes if you just even have a really strong why or purpose, that is spiritual capital. And without that, if you don't invest in that, the others become really difficult. it just keeps coming back to, if you want to encourage resilience, be more resilient. If you want to encourage, it starts with you. It just keeps coming back to that all the time. And I know this is not for everyone. I know that a lot of people will feel safer talking about it than not living it. I get that. And I always want to invite people into taking the risk of being open and vulnerable for the win being that young people can then have a model, a waggle of what a good one looks like, as opposed to fear. But this is hard. This is not easy. So where have you invested over COVID? Where have you invested your emotional capital? Your capital? Have you kind of worried about money or made sure you got money in place? Has that been your drive? Has it been learning a new skill? Everyone was baking sourdough bread, weren't they, in the beginning, because we had time on our hands. Is it in physical? Have you looked after yourself? Have you done that first before you look after everyone else? Is it in relational? Have you lent into relationships or showed up for people? I think people were talking about this on a call last week. The conversations they've had with parents that they wouldn't have had if this hadn't have happened, because they've leaned in and showed up for them. Or spiritual, is it in you and where you see yourself, this kind of something bigger than yourself that you're tapping into and working with? Which area of capital have you invested in over this lockdown? And I guess, which is it different to the area that you're going to invest in going forward? Because I'm hoping that physical is something that people actually take the time, to do something about as we move forward. The whole point is, Anna, jump to the next slide for me. The whole point is showing up as 100% yourself. Resilience comes from you being willing to forgive yourself, being uncomfortable with discomfort, being intentional rather than automatic. They're the three things. We can talk about, navigating chaos and doing hard stuff. That doesn't necessarily breed resilience. Resilience has to be around those three things in order for you to be living at the full potential and the full power of who you are as a human, because everything's in alignment. As long as you've got that kind of spiritual capital in terms of what I stand for, reconnecting with my why I came here in the first place, why I took this job in the first place, why I fostered in the first place. If you can reconnect with that, if you can stand on that going forward, you become invincible, unstoppable. You can always be broken, but you know how to reframe. So, and if that isn't the best example, the best gift that we can give to young people, I don't know what is. I know that has been the reason that I'm such a phenomenal human female now. Vicky, thank you. She talks about relational and spiritual. And I just think those two together, this is how we affect change. This is how we become transformation agents and not aspirationally transformational. So I think those two are good. And the physical ones as well. Fantastic. Because if you're not in one piece, how do you ever expect to move forward? Jump on to the next slide for me, Anna. I'm aware of time. It's been spiritual for me. I know I stick it out, but it's been a great time to make time for mass every morning. I tell you what, Lords, it doesn't even matter if what you do is just sit and breathe for 5 minutes. It's creating a space that says, during this time, I am human being, not human doing. Because the whole thing is, we start off as human beings. It's like, I think of it like a pendulum. You're a human being and you're supposed to swing into doing. So be rested, get momentum, swing into doing, do some doing. And then when you need rest, the pendulum swims back into being. So you can rest and recuperate, ready to go to the next day. Nature of resilience. But what we do is we're a pendulum, all right? We start in being, we swing into doing, and we stay there until we literally are falling over. And then we collapse back into being. The pendulum falls off, rolls along the ground, lands in a pit of being. Not by choice, not by intention, by accident. And we might stay there for a bit, just enough to patch ourselves up so we can get back to doing. I mean, it's just such an irresponsible way of living our lives. To be responsibly generous to the people we serve, we've got to show up more. We've got to be more grounded in ourselves and be intentional about moving that way. Now, the most precious thing about this is showing the journey. So I learned to juggle. When I first started teaching, I learned to juggle, and I documented my journey with video cameras so I could show my kids, this is what learning looks like. And my husband was doing the videoing, and I put together the clips at the end, and I showed him, and I said, oh, what do you think of the video? And he looked at it and he went, Where's all the bits where you were crying? Where's that one where you threw the balls to the ground? Where's the one where you threw the ball at me? Told me I wasn't holding the camera properly and that's why I couldn't do it. Where's that one where you started swearing? I'm like, sweetheart, you don't know anything about education, okay? You don't put those things in. This is about learning. So anyway, I go to school and I say to my class, okay, I'm going to show you this video. You know, I've been talking about it for ages. It was a year one class. I show them, and I say to them, I suddenly start getting really aware. I say, you know, we've talked about feedback being kind, specific, and helpful. I kind of feel like I really want the feedback to be kind because because I actually added some of the failures in. I added some of the ways of going. So I just want you to think about being kind specifically, you know, really kind, because I don't have to do this. I mean, I'm showing you my mistakes. I don't have to. And I suddenly found myself getting really anxious around my 5 and 6 year olds. Anyway, so I showed them the video and I showed them the mistakes and I showed them the outtakes. I didn't show them the swearing, but I showed them that real frustration and crying. I showed them it all. And then I showed them the juggling at the end. And then I said, what does that video make you think? How does that video make you feel? And one guy put his hand up and said, Miss, it's good to see you looking stressed. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Stress is my baseline, mate. I am permanently stressed. What you're seeing is the 2% above stress where I managed to keep it together for half an hour. But of course they don't see that, because when things go wrong, I don't go, oh, it's hard. I just go, well, it's okay. We'll do this. Because I do it for them, but I don't do it for me. But what really hit me was what Zaina said. Zaina was a little girl, you know, pigtails. She'd been in and out of foster care. She had a fringe that was too long. She had to tip her head back to see. She's always messy, always wearing the same yellow jumper. And Zaina sat there very quietly. She never puts her hand up. And I was talking afterwards and I said, you know what's weird is I felt really scared showing you this. I felt worried because I felt a bit stupid, if I'm honest, because I wanted to show you where I got it right and actually showed you all the other stuff. And I just felt I felt like scared for you to see it. It felt awful. And this was my body language as well. And Zaina put her hand up and I'm like, wow, Zaina talks. So I was like, yeah, Zaina. And she said, that's how I feel when I show you my work. I mean, talk about, you know, relational capital. I knew all the stuff about Zaina. I knew everything. I knew her background. I knew what she was going through. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that's how she felt every time I encouraged her to step forward. And that idea, she's an incredibly resilient girl, but the resilience that she showed, it was, you know, the vanilla style resilience I was wanting as a young teacher was, can you finish this piece of work? The resilience she was showing to turn up at school and engage every day, massive. But I didn't register that. I registered what I needed her to be, not what she was. Which brings me on to this last kind of most important slide, really. It's this, how you define yourself. You know, we can always say, well, you know, it's not my job and this is my job, blah, blah, blah. Of course it's not your job. It's just the right thing to do. Of course it's not your job to be kind. You don't get paid for being kind. You don't get paid for being human. You don't get celebrated. You don't get acknowledged. You don't get encouraged. And yet, in this time, at this moment, that's what matters more than anything else. If you want to have the other influence and invest in the other types of capital, humankind, that's got to come first. A mixture of this has got to come first. So I'd love you to get really clear around why you're doing what you do. Take the time to reflect and do on that, and then get really clear around what that looks like, how that shows up for people. Because when you know why you're doing what you're doing, you're being defined by that, you're being led by that, you're making decisions based on that, not based on the limitations, what the government says, what the school are, what Maureen from accounting has told you. None of those things, they're all external locus of control. And if you can do that for yourself, this journey, because everything I've said today, take that and use that with young people. Talk about the tendencies, talk about the support challenge matrix. This is critical. This is all stuff I do in school, but I've tried to level it up and make it look posh because I'm doing it with adults. It's the same thing. But what I've noticed is that if you try and do this when you haven't done that journey yourself, it's almost insulting. You're asking people with like dream poverty to dream. And you're asking people who are surviving to just take their hands away and float. And that's huge. It's hugely frightening, and it's not always resourceful because they haven't done the journey. So jump onto this one just before we go to questions. I love this slide. Have you got any swag? If not, get some. Swag stands for seriously wild, audacious goal. And I don't mean an extra hour for marking or, 10 minutes sleep as a lion. It's got to be serious. It's got to be wild. It's got to be audacious. Something that you have got no idea of how you would actually achieve. And the reason I ask people to do this, and I get young people to do this, is it gets them future forward thinking. It gets them to the point where it's like, so if money was no object, if time was no object, if energy was no object, if I had no obligations, what would I do? What would I be doing? This is what I would be doing. And that kind of swag moving in, by Tina, by Naomi, that swag moving in is one of the biggest things you can do to take people towards where they want to be. So I'm going to leave you with my free toolkit. Stick the slide up. You can download that. I'm happy to stay and answer questions, or you can kind of send and tweet them afterwards. But Anna, what do you think? This is one of my kind of favorite workshops on the back of what we've done. How do you think? How do you feel? Because I don't know which one you are. So
definitely feeling. I think that is where I sit all of the time. For me, it's made me really stop and think about. I think I've been on a journey in lockdown more so than I perhaps realised. Yeah. I think I kind of started because I have a wonderful career in terms of working for the local authority. I didn't have to worry about that kind of financial element. That wasn't a blip for me at the beginning. But I very quickly realised in week one, I have got to put the physical kind of element in. And I know that had I have been living somewhere like Italy, where you weren't allowed to go out for a walk every day, I really wouldn't have been in a good place. That was the one thing that I've done all the way through lockdown, just gone out for a walk at some point with my other half, just to kind of just reframe what we were doing. And we've done it all the way through, and we've stuck at it. Yeah. I obviously do the kind of physical rowing thing. That's very much me, about self and having time to stop. But I suppose as I've gone through the latter part of lockdown, it's moved much more towards that relationships, missing family, not spending time with them, but also starting to think about what next and how do I support everybody around me in my little bubble to make sure that we're all going forward in the right way and being spiritually grounded as much as I possibly can be. So I feel like I've moved just in that time.
It wasn't that you weren't doing that before, but other stuff, you prioritized other stuff above that. Yeah. And with that stuff gone, you suddenly have to prioritize. We start in survival. Change only comes through inspiration or desperation. And most of the time it's desperation because we get inspired, but our desire to make a difference isn't bigger than our fear of trying. Desperation is a great driver if we can respond to it in a positive way. And I think that's a great example of how that positivity has driven you forward. And we'll bring you'll come back stronger. When we go forward to normal, you'll be stronger because of that engagement during this time.
Yeah, and I think there are definitely things that I've recognised that I now want to keep doing, that I've started doing, that maybe have risen more to the priority, the top of the pile, that didn't feature enough. And it's like, no, I need to hang on to that. That's a really good thing. Keep doing that. So yeah, definitely for me, that capital is that how it increases and how it's changed over time is really significant for me. So that's definitely one of my takeaways. It's the intent, isn't it? Let's just go away being more intentional in what we're doing.
For young people especially, I think that everyone, rather than saying what did you do over lockdown, what are you glad to be back for, what have you been looking forward to, it's the moving them towards that, because that's where you can start growth, rather than not doing the therapy piece of how bad has it been, how good has it been, but what does it look like next, where do you want to go from here? That's the swag element that can actually take people's focus to a different point, so that they're not living under the chaos afterwards, because lots of people are going to come out of lockdown and still be in lockdown emotionally and physically and mentally for a long time. So it's navigating that journey for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, in terms of us kind of starting to think about moving forward, I've got a quick question that I want to ask you, and this one's quite important for us in terms of the virtual school. It's about us starting to think about what happens next. We've just spent 3 incredible sessions alongside Jaz. We know that we've had some conversations with Jaz around what next, but actually, do you want more? Because we need to know. So could you now go to the poll question? All right, so I'm launching that now, and I need you to then just say, do you want more? Or no, you don't. There's no in between with this, sorry, Anna's quite clear cut. I just want a yes or a no. I think I kind of know what the answer might be, Jazz, kind of, possibly, but
More,
it's always good to know.
because this whole kind of group thing is quite good. I do a lot of stuff where we're in smaller groups and we're moving forward and we're going into chat rooms and we're coming back. There's lots of different ways. I think it's more kind of the embedding and the changing and moving forward, because this has been like a wake-up call, something to help you. But I'm interested in what happens, 9 o'clock Monday morning when things go wrong. I'm interested in taking on this as a way of being, rather than being inspired and then having to kind of keep it going on your own. I think that was my frustration before we're speaking. I can get a room on their feet, I can get people laughing and crying within 2 sentences, but what happens when I'm not there and it becomes a memory? So what I want is like measurable increase in impact over time, and support and challenge being calibrated at the same time too.
Okay, according to me, that's pretty conclusive. All right, I think that pretty much says to us that actually it's a definite yes. You'll be pleased to know we are going to do something further in terms of thinking about that, and we want to carry on giving you some ongoing support in terms of making sure that that happens, and we will come back to you and follow up on that in terms of what happens next. We're currently making those plans and obviously needing to respond to the wonderful world of government guidance in terms of how we move and how we might do that in the autumn. So we are processing that as a whole. Okay, so next thing, poll question number 2. All right, okay, I'm curious, all right? I'm just genuinely curious. I just want you to tell me, out of the sessions as a whole, how's it made you feel? How do you rate this? So how many star ratings are you going to give these 3 sessions? And let's just make Jazz feel as good as we possibly can at this point, because it's about us feeding back in terms of us responding and saying exactly what we want. All right? Because
Awesome.
Positivity goes 2 ways, Jazz.
I love secretly awesome as a as a standard. It's beautiful. That is beautiful. And I mean, thank you, because it's not, I don't just wake up and do these sessions. It takes a lot of work and a lot of meeting you where you are. But I said to Keely at the beginning, I don't have to do this for many people financially. I don't have to show up in the way that I show up. I'm very picky and choosy about who I give my time to. And this is not an accident. This is not, yeah, okay, you offered me a role, I'll do it. This is because of the impact that you guys made on me. So I take that and I hold it close to my heart. Thank you for that. And I'm also okay with disappointing and okay, because that gives me a chance to reframe. So, go for it. Go and tweet me on Twitter and tell me where I'm lacking. I love that. Do it kindly. Don't be an idiot. But, all of it is welcomed.
Okay. For me, then, that is what I wanted to know. Do you want to answer that question, or are you okay? Okay. So in terms of us kind of starting to think about what happens next, we are obviously going to be in touch in terms of following on with what we've been talking about. So we are going to be thinking about how do we carry Jazz around in our pocket in the course of the next 6 weeks. For me, I know that lots of you are probably going to take some recharge time, but actually some of you have got to balance that up against a whole different load of commitments in terms of what happens next. All right, please make sure you do. We are going to be in touch throughout the course of the summer break. All right, you can choose when you open that email. All right, we fully understand that you're going to take some time out, and please do that. All right, but we will be in touch, and then we will be in touch in September in terms of what happens next. We are going to send you an evaluation which will be a bit reflective about what have you taken from all 3 sessions. That will follow, and I'm really pleased to tell you that our recording of session 2 is now fully up and running, and so we will be sharing that with you later on today alongside the evaluation from today. All right, that's all I needed to say. Jazz, is there anything that you wanted to add as a final word before we all go and maybe grab a bite of lunch?
I just, rock on and celebrate the fact that you are in a place where everybody is with you, where there's a real element of with, and lean into that with, because God, there are people that would kill to work in Norfolk Virtual School. Based on what I've seen, this would be amazing for some people. So you've got it. Make the most of it.
Okay, Thank you very much for that, Jaz. Take care, everyone. We're expecting you now to start signing your way out. Take care, and we'll see you sometime soon. Have a really good summer. Take care.
Guys. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to deal with my child.
That's fine.